So for my ISI 4, we had to have two strategies from our 50 strategies for ESL textbook. And my first strategy that I had was GIST, which is generating interaction between schemata and text. And basically, it can be used for any subject, but mainly it's whenever you're reading something. It can be a science article or any type of reading of something. And so the point of it is usually it's in a group setting. It can be just in small groups of like 2 or 3. It can be in a whole class setting. And so at the end of every paragraph, typically for shorter text, it can be every like 2 to 3 sentences, whatever the teacher feels necessary. And you'll pause at that paragraph, for instance, and you're going to want to get the key points of it and make it into one sentence that summarizes that one paragraph into a good sentence summary. So that way, whenever you look back on the text, you don't have to read every paragraph word for word. Instead, you can just look at your sentence summaries or your gist and have a good idea of what that paragraph is. So that way it's easier to look back whenever you're answering STAR questions or just reading quizzes in general. And so the step by step, the first step is identify appropriate text for gist, because every text you don't really need it. It's really good to use for something that has a lot of information that's very long, maybe. For instance, like STAR passages, this was great for. I knew I did it when I did the tax in elementary school, so that way you could get a good idea of every single paragraph. And then the second step is to group the students. You want to divide the groups, the group of students into 2 to 4 people and have one person as a leader. And then you also want to model, or the third step is demonstrate the strategy, and that's teacher modeling. And so if you're just implementing this, a good idea to do is have your story or article, and then as a class, you read the first paragraph silently, and then as a whole, you're going to come up with a good sentence summary for that. And this is when you can get out the graphic organizer. And so this is the one that I chose, and it has your good who, what, when, where, why, and how. And then so the students can fill this in for every paragraph. Some paragraphs may not need it. You may not get a new person every paragraph. And then below you can write your sentence. And so this is something that they can look at to see for every paragraph, like make sure they have key points to this. And then you're going to want to discuss the summary sentence. And so this is where you have each group read their summary sentence to the whole class. And then as a class, you can decide what information was valuable, what information you should maybe leave out, and then come up with the best sentence possible. And then you want to read and summarize paragraph by paragraph for the rest of the story and do sentence summaries for every single paragraph. And then you want to read and compare the summaries. So once the whole class is finished reading that story with all the paragraphs and they've done all their gist, go through for a whole class, and every group reads off their sentence summary to see which sentence summaries are best, and that's what they can use to keep on that story if they're going to keep that story forever. And then lastly, you're going to assess to document students' involvement and participation. This is for the teacher, and this is when they'll walk around the room to assess each student, check to see if they're participating, if they're struggling, maybe go in and see what needs help. And then for my second strategy, it's reporting back, and that's for instance, I did mine for science because I feel like that's a really good time for students to be reporting back the information that they just did. For instance, mine's a volcano science experiment. And so here they need to recall all their steps that they took. So how did they build the volcano? What materials did they use? What's the key vocabulary? And it's really using written words to oral words and using key vocabulary. And then they will use this to present it to the class, so that way all the students are able to know what they did in order to take this step. And so in the step-by-step for reporting back, you need to prepare the students for action. So you want to describe the activity and model what is expected of the students. You want to list and review the steps. So maybe put the steps for the lesson on the board. So for example, 1, create a volcano. 2, make a list of the steps that you as a group used. And 3, you want to practice reporting back with your group. So this is where you want to practice what you did from first to last, as basic as you take the lid off the jar, you put the lid back on the jar. I mean, very, very precise steps. And then you want to verbalize the action. So this is for the teacher, and this is where you want to walk around, you want to reinforce vocabulary and scaffold language when needed. And then you also want to allow for verbal practice. And this is when the group has finished completing their activity, allow time for practice in their groups for reporting back before they have to do it in front of the entire class, just so that way they make sure that they're getting all the information and their peers can help them if they're like, oh wait, you missed this, or maybe you should use this type of vocabulary instead of that. And another important step is celebrating the achievements. And after every group has said the reporting back to their entire whole class setting, as the teacher place like the good word vocabulary that they used like on the chalkboard, so that way all the students can see it and they can write it down, or they can know, oh, maybe I should use this word next time. And it's just really helpful for that student and makes them feel good. And then write the report. So this is where I did a graphic organizer on the volcanoes. You can use a different one for any type of whatever lesson you're doing. And this is where they're going to write the words that they use to report back on paper. And then assess students' progress and understanding. This is for the teacher. It's where you're going to place the student records of their achievements and other information in the student documents. And then evaluate your use of reporting back. And then as a teacher, you want to know, was your class reporting back on a beginning, development, accomplished, or exemplary level? Thank you.